How can you save time editing your work in Microsoft Excel? Hi, I'm Dawn. In this online training, we'll look at 10 time saving Excel editing tips and techniques. Number 1, navigating in a worksheet. One of the ways to make it easier to work with Excel is to know some of the handy keyboard shortcuts for moving in a worksheet. The first is Control and the End key. This will move you to the bottom right-hand corner of your worksheet, whether it's 100 rows or 10,000 rows. If this moves beyond the last point of data in your worksheet, then you may want to delete some of the extra rows and columns that are left over from previous work. Control Home. This will take you to the upper left-hand corner of your worksheet, often to cell A1. If you have freeze panes enabled, this will take you to the first available active cell. Next, let's look at how we can move around our current data range. So for instance, to move to the bottom of this column, that would be Control and the down arrow key. It would only stop if there was a blank cell somewhere in between. Control Up. Control Right moves you to the far right-hand side of this data range. And Control Left. That will move you to the very beginning of the row. Another way to get to the beginning of the row is to hit the Home key. To be more specific with your navigation, use Go To. This is available in 3 different ways. The name box, which is just to the left of your formula bar, is a great place to either navigate to an existing range name or to a cell address. For instance, G50. And now Excel moves to that specific location. To bring up the Go To dialog box, that's either the F5 function key or Control G. From here, you can specify the location you want to move to. You would also see any range names listed here. And once again, let's say we want to go to H75. And simply OK or Enter will take us to that location. Let's look at that again, either F5 or Control G. Now choose Special. This is an excellent way to highlight specific parts of an Excel spreadsheet, whether they're blank cells, conditional formats, places where you have data validation. For this, I'll choose Formulas. When you have very detailed, complex data, this is a great option for auditing to make sure, for instance, that you have formulas in all the places where you expect it versus some raw data entry. Let's see what happens for this. And although this is a simple example, again with a complex worksheet, this will highlight where there are formulas. Your next step might be to format these cells to make it easier to audit and confirm that formulas are every place that they should be within your worksheet. Number 2, selection techniques. Have you ever been caught up with what I call the runaway mouse? This is simply where we're trying to highlight a range of values or cells, and the mouse is simply not easy to control. We have too much data that we're trying to select. What are some options? This is often, once again, keyboard shortcuts or working in conjunction with the mouse and the keyboard. Let's look at some possibilities for that. To select only the active or current data range, press Control A. To select the entire worksheet, press Control A a second time. An alternative to this is to use the selection box, which appears above your rows and to the left of your column labels. That will also select the entire worksheet. Both of these actions are helpful if you want to apply some consistent formatting. What would be another way to select? To avoid getting caught up in that runaway mouse, start at the beginning of the range you want to select. And then instead of dragging your mouse, hold down the Shift key and click at what will be the end of that range. Once you select, then your options could be to cut, copy, format, whatever you'd like to do with the selected range. Another variation on that is, once again, start at the beginning of the range and hold down the Shift key, but this time we're using our directional keys. That might be the down arrow key, right arrow key, page down. The whole time we're holding down the Shift key. The nice thing about this over using the mouse or trying to drag with the mouse is that you have very specific control over exactly what you want to select. You could also use your horizontal and vertical scroll bars to navigate to where you want, and then when you're holding Shift, you can click at the very specific location you want to go to. Another technique to consider is when you want to select non-adjacent or non-contiguous cells. In this case, we're using the Control key as well as the mouse. I'll hold down the Control key and then click wherever I want to, whether or not these cells are close to each other or even in the same column. And then once those are selected, then it might be to apply a formatting action. In this case, I could right-click and choose bold. Or we could use a keyboard shortcut, Control-B, to apply the bold. Try these selection techniques to make it much easier for you when you want to apply changes to your work in Excel. Number 3, cell editing and data entry. Data entry is the heart of Excel. If you can't enter data into your worksheets quickly and accurately, you also cannot easily use Excel's tools to analyze and report on the data. Try these Microsoft Excel data entry tips and shortcuts to save time and effort. To review some of the important basics with editing cell entries, the first is that if you want to type in a new entry, there's no need to delete what you already have there. Simply type on top of it and hit enter. However, when we do want to change the existing content, whether it's text, data, or even a formula, we have a couple different options for that. One is that we could go up to our formula bar, and this is where we can edit this content. Second is to do in-place editing. Now for in-place editing, this is often easier because we're in the location in the worksheet where we want to make the change. So 2 different ways to get to the same place, and that is either to double-click into the cell, or we could press the F2 function key. They will both do the same thing, that is to open up the cell for editing. Anytime you want to delete an entry without changing it, simply hit your delete key. The cell is now empty, but it retains the formatting that may have been applied. If we deleted this, it still is bold, and then typing in a different entry at some point would still retain that formatting. Should you want to clear out everything, what you can do is look in the Home tab, and we'll look here for Clear. In the drop-down, you have the option then to clear all. This means formatting and content. Clear contents is the equivalent to selecting it and hitting the delete key. You also could clear formats whether or not there's content. This gives you a lot more flexibility editing the contents of your cells. Also, keep in mind your undo and redo. You may work with these every day. There are a couple different options for working with undo and redo. If you know the keyboard shortcuts, for instance, undo is Control-Z. I type in an entry here and change my mind, Control-Z. Now, if I want to redo the last action, whether it's editing or formatting or some other choice within Excel, Control-Y is a redo. You'll also find these built into the Quick Access toolbar, which will either be above or below your ribbon in Excel. Let's look at some other quick and easy shortcuts for entering data in Excel. To enter the current date, that is Control and the semicolon. This cell will take on whatever formatting has been currently applied to these cells. The time is Control and the colon. Now, unlike functions, this is capturing the current date and time, and it's not going to change. It's not dynamic. It will be whatever date and time you're using these shortcuts. When you have a lot of repetitive data, this is where we can leverage some other keyboard shortcuts. Now, these are some very simple examples, and it wouldn't take much for us just to type this directly. But Control D or Control and this single quote are ways to duplicate from the cell or the row immediately above. Once again, Control D. When you have lengthy titles, comments, notes, it might be tempting to actually hit the Enter key to try to move it down to the next line. And in this case, we don't want to create another row. I'd simply like to see this title on 2 different lines. For that, the trick is to press Alt-Enter. And this can be a handy way for you to be able to work with longer column headings in lists that you're sorting and filtering, and simply to create a line break for that heading text. And we'll make a quick adjustment to the row height, so that's easy to display. Let's wrap up with 2 other quick shortcuts. When you're working in a workbook, there may be times when you simply want to add a brand new worksheet. And here again, as with a lot of things in Excel, there can be 2, 3, sometimes 4 different ways of getting something done. The keyboard shortcut for adding a new worksheet is Shift and the F11 function key. This new worksheet will then be named with the next available sheet number. In this case, it's sheet 1. When you have lengthy text entries, comments, notes, or formulas, another way for you to more easily edit them could be by double-clicking, as we saw earlier, for in-place editing. Or we could expand the formula bar. The formula bar defaults to 1 line, but by simply moving to the right-hand side and clicking on that down arrow, you could expand it. Notice here as well, there's a keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift+U. Now you can then size this, and perhaps you want it to be 3 or 4 lines, or 2 lines. It's up to you. And it will stay that way unless you decide to collapse it. Once again, the keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-U. Try these data entry shortcuts to see how you can save time when you're working in Excel. Number 4, working with rows and columns. When you want to change the width of a column in a worksheet, the easy way to do this is to simply move to the right-hand edge of that column, and you look for the double-headed arrow, and simply click and drag to either expand it or collapse it. And understand that that width information that you see when this is selected really doesn't equate to inches or something that might be a common reference for you or measurement. This will let you specify exactly what you want for that. Now, another option for that, though, is rather than trying to figure out exactly how wide that should be, especially if you had a lot of content in this column, simply move to that edge and double click. This is called auto fit, and it becomes a great way for most columns to be able to automatically size them. If we have multiple columns that we want to make consistent or to auto fit, we can select more than one. And once again, you can move to the edge, and you either have the option to increase or decrease the width of all of the selected columns, or double click for AutoFit. AutoFit can be a great way to quickly resize one or more columns. It often doesn't work really well when you have lengthy headings, for instance, because then you may end up with columns that are significantly wider than you want or need. Adjusting the row height works very much the same way. You can either move to the bottom edge of one of the rows that you want to change, or a selection of rows. Think of this as like a little window shade. That is, we can drag it up or down to adjust the height, or double click for best fit or auto fit. You'll also find these options in the Home tab of the ribbon. You'll find them under Format, and here you can see row height, auto fit row height, and more. This is a great way to explore how you can more effectively change the appearance of your rows and columns. What if you want to insert another cell or column or row? Well, the easy way is to move to the location, and then you have several different options. This could be to go to the Home tab and to choose Insert. From here, we could choose to insert sheet rows, and now we have a new row. Another option is to right-click. This can be really handy to simply use the shortcut menu. There's so many different options that are available to you immediately here from the shortcut menu. When we see an option like Insert or Delete, followed by the ... that tells us there's more, meaning a dialog box where we provide Excel with more information. So based upon our selection, we would have the option to insert an entire row, column, or even to simply shift these cells down while keeping the other ones to the right intact. Here I'll choose entire row. My preference is to actually select before I insert. Here I can be more specific. I want 3 new rows, and because it's selected, I'm a lot more specific about what I'm looking for. I'll right-click, and then Insert is automatically then assumed that this is inserting new rows. The delete commands simply work in reverse. We can select the rows whether or not they have content, right-click, and choose Delete. Explore these options in the Home tab for Insert and Delete, as well as those shortcuts in the shortcut menu. In some worksheets, you may want to hide rows or columns of data because you don't want to print or display formulas, maybe columns with some working calculations or other data. Keep in mind that if it's confidential information such as displayed here, then hiding does not keep someone from being able to see it. But if we were printing out to paper or to a PDF, then this might be all that we need to do. So for instance, to hide these columns, I'll select them first and then simply right-click, and here is Hide. I can also find this as well under the Format command in the Home tab. You'll be able to spot when columns or rows are hidden because the column labels and row labels do not change. And so we can see here that we have this gap. Sometimes we accidentally hide, and that is when we're working with that auto fit feature. That is grabbing the right-hand edge of a column. If your intention might be to make it much narrower and you get a little carried away, notice what happens here. I'm going from my width and changing it smaller, smaller, smaller. As soon as it becomes 0, then it ends up being hidden. We can sometimes run into trouble too if it's a little bit greater than 0 because it's not technically hidden, but it's not necessarily visible. Both of those are techniques to hide selected columns and or rows. If you want to unhide, one of the easiest things to do is to select the surrounding columns. In this case, I have a number of them. And then we can right-click or go up to the Home tab and choose from there the ribbon. Here I'll simply choose Unhide. If it's a little bit more challenging to bring those back, for some reason you simply are unable to unhide, especially if it ended up being column A, then we often can select the entire worksheet. We'll press Control A to do so, and then you can move to the right-hand edge of a column and double-click to auto-fit. What will happen is that action will cause all of those columns to be displayed, whether or not they had previously been hidden. And the same approach works when you want to hide or unhide your rows. Number 5, cut, copy, and paste techniques. Copying and moving Excel content is a frequent task when editing worksheets. Let's look at your options when it's time to copy or move in Microsoft Excel. The basic steps to move or copy are to select the cells, rows, or columns that you want to move or copy. Next, you would choose Cut to Move or Copy to Duplicate. and then move to the new location, which could be on another worksheet, or it could be in a worksheet in another workbook. And then you pick the paste command. But let's dig into those options in more detail. First, we would select our data. And once that's selected, we can find our cut and copy options in a number of different places. First, we look in the Home tab, and here we have Cut, Copy, and then our paste options, which become available once we select that first action. Or we could press keyboard shortcuts, Control X for cut, Control C for copy, and Control V for paste. Another approach would be to right-click, and here we have cut or copy as well as other paste options. Additionally, we could drag and drop, which we'll explore, or we can even autofill when we want to copy to contiguous cells. Once we have something selected, let's say the next step is to copy. I'll press Control C for copy. Now I'll move over to the destination. And to keep this simple, I'll simply move into the same worksheet. Notice in the status bar that we see the message, select destination and press enter or choose paste. When it's a copy command, you do have some options here. If it's a one-time copy, all you need to do is press enter. You don't need to do a paste. Let's undo that for a moment. First, we move to where we want to see this copy. And one of the mistakes I see often is the attempt to highlight a matching range. And that's not necessary, and it can cause you troubles or error messages. Simply move to the upper left-hand corner of that location. As we saw, we could press enter to simply put in one copy. If we actually wanted multiple copies, this is where the paste could come in. So Control V for paste, but now this content is still sitting in memory and waiting for us if we in fact wanted to paste it in other locations. I'll finish this up by hitting enter. Now I have two copies. One of the things to notice here too is that all of the formatting came along with the content. And if it included formulas, that would be part of it as well. Sometimes that's not exactly what we're looking for. Consider, for instance, if we had these totals and we wanted to actually bring them into another worksheet. Well, doing so, these totals actually have a formula behind them. And we might want that, or we might just simply want the raw results. For this, we'll highlight, once again, a copy. I'll move to the new location, and instead of simply hitting enter or paste, let's look at the number of options that are available. We'll right-click to come into the shortcut menu, and notice here that we could paste it in, and here's one of the challenges. It has a formula, and it's just going to be calculating the range that appears to the left-hand side, and that isn't giving us any results. Or we could paste the values. We could paste the formulas. You could even do a transpose, which can help you when you have data from another source. Perhaps we want to just paste the formatting, or if the source is coming from a different location, we could paste a link to it. For this, I'll paste values. This is a great way to transfer information. And come back to it, right-click, and paste the formatting. Consider how you might just take portions of that paste command to give you exactly what you're looking for. Because this is a copy action with a variety of paste actions, we still have the dancing ants or marquee for the selection. To clear that, I'll hit escape. If, for instance, it's a cut action, you only have one time for it to cut or move that content. Another way to copy to contiguous cells, whether it's data entry, values, or even formulas, is called autofill, which we'll explore in more detail next. With autofill, we simply move to the selection, whether it's one cell or multiple cells, and then move to the bottom right-hand corner of that selection. There will be a square, black or green square, And when your mouse hovers over that, you'll see a black cross. Now we can move vertically or horizontally to duplicate or copy that content. In this case, I'll simply fill down. And so now I have a duplication or copy of that content very quickly through the use of autofill. This is great for headings, for numbers, values, and formulas. Another way to copy or to move is with drag and drop. Here again, we select the cells that we want to work with and we'll move to the edge. So not to the corner like with autofill, but any of the edges there, and look for the four-headed arrow. Drag and drop works best when it's a fairly short distance that you want to move or copy. For this to move, I'll press and hold and drag, and when I release the mouse, I have actually repositioned those selected cells. To make a copy of it, we once again move to that edge, to the little thicker outside border, and for this, I'll hold down Control. Now my mouse pointer changes, so it's my arrow with a plus. I'm holding down Control, press and hold and drag, and now I have a copy. Although we can do this across workbooks, especially if we have multiple windows open, you'll probably find it easiest when it's a fairly short distance. You're simply trying to make adjustments to the content in your worksheet. Which of these cut and copy actions makes sense when you're editing your worksheets? Number 6, using autofill. How can you quickly copy data or create an automatic series in Excel? Autofill is the answer. Autofill is a great way for you to copy or duplicate from a selected range to contiguous or touching cells. Let's say that I wanted to see multiple occurrences of this entry. Well, we simply move to that cell, and it can be more than one cell that's selected, and look for this fill handle. That's a little square in the bottom right-hand corner. When you hover your mouse, it becomes a black cross. For this, I'll fill vertically. And now I have multiple copies of that entry. But autofill has a lot of different personalities. If I wanted a series of a value or a number, we could try it again. Now, right now, I just have multiple copies of the number 1. But look for this Smart tag. This is the autofill options. And by selecting this, we can see that we have other choices. How do I actually want to work with this range? And for this one, I want to fill a series. And now I see that series automatically created. But we can even take that further. I'll select this and start again. Now I have a series that I want to teach Excel. And for that, I'll highlight both of those cells and now grab that fill handle and notice how smart Excel is in figuring out what I want. Excel also has some built-in series or list, and these include the months of the year as well as the days of the week. So whether you spell them out or abbreviate them, then the autofill will automatically generate that series for you. And this could be also used horizontally if I was building a budget, for instance. Another part of the autofill is when we have dates. And for this, I'll grab that fill handle once again, and Excel will give me a series of dates. Now that is the default. Perhaps that's not exactly what I want. We'll go once again to those autofill options. Did you actually want to just copy the cells? Because it's a date, we have a lot of different variations. Maybe you only want weekdays. And now we have that result. Now this isn't a formula. This is actually data entry. How can you leverage autofill? Let's look at my favorite autofill trick for duplicating or copying content, especially when it's a formula. This is a great time saver. We have a formula that is calculating that quarterly data. Now imagine that you have hundreds or thousands of rows where you want to duplicate that. Well, even if you're familiar with autofill, it can be kind of tedious to grab that fill handle and drag it manually down. Instead, move to that fill handle and double click. And the crowd goes wild because how much time can you save just by knowing this one trick? Very fast and easy. Number 7, find and replace. Excel's find and replace features are great time savers, especially with worksheets that might span thousands of rows and columns. Hidden in these features are options which simplify how you can navigate and change your Excel data. Let's start first with the find command. And this might be something that you're using every day. The easiest ways to launch that are either with Control F or in our Home tab, we look for Find under Find and Select. From here, specify what you're looking for. I want to find all the occurrences of admin. To put more power behind your find and replace commands, open up Options. From here, we might want to specify that we want to search the entire workbook or match the case because perhaps we're looking for a lowercase version to change it to uppercase. And do you want to limit only to those cells that have only that content, or perhaps it's part of a lengthier entry? Now this will search whether it's in formulas or simply data entry, text, values. So you can decide exactly how you want to work with this. For right now, I'll simply choose Find Next. Now that could be a little bit tedious, especially if we have a lot of occurrences. Here's one of the ways you can get a lot more power out of the find and replace. Choose Find All. Now we see all of the matches where this entry occurs. This will help you, especially if you choose to do a find and replace. You might discover some things that you had forgotten about or didn't realize were in that worksheet or even in that workbook. The nice thing about this too, let's say you were looking for a project code or an identifier, you can move right to it by simply moving to this as a hyperlink. And now Excel will take you right to that location. This can make it much faster for you to find the content you're looking for. For this, if I wanted to isolate it, I might say match entire cell contents. Now we try the find all, and I get a much smaller subset of that. The replace command is also available from this dialog box. We could find it or move to it from Excel by either pressing Control H, the keyboard shortcut, or once again finding it in the Home tab under Find and Select. For this one, I'd like to find admin only where it appears in that department, and I'll replace it with administration. For that, I could once again look at the Find All just to confirm that I'm not going to be replacing anything else. And this is another time saver. If we can check our work ahead of time, we're less likely to have to go find next, replace, find next, replace. Instead, I'll replace all. How would this help you save time? Let's look at another variation on that. Find and replace can help you with formatting. Maybe you have data that had been previously manually formatted with a highlight or bold or a color, and you'd like to change those. Or you'd like to find specific content and apply a format to it. For this one, I will look for all occurrences of blue. And what I want to do with that is replace that with the color blue. We can choose then format from this, where you can even choose formatting from an existing cell. But I'll dig into this a little bit more so. And from the format dialog box, I'll change the font here and pick the color to be blue. Additionally, I'll make that bold italics. And then we'll go ahead and OK. Here's a preview of what it will look like. I might want to just simply say Find All, show me, so I'm not going to be changing something I didn't intend to. And now I'll go ahead and replace all. As you can see here, we've leveraged find and replace to be able to also work with formatting. Number 8, auto sum tricks. You may be using the auto sum option every day to build sums or totals in Excel. But did you know there's a keyboard shortcut for that? To create a total here, simply press Alt equals. Once you confirm the range, simply hit Enter. And now we have a quick sum function, just as if we had typed it manually or used the auto sum button. Although a lot of projects don't really lend themselves to this, there might be opportunities at times when you can actually have Excel build those formulas for you very easily. Here's the way that works. For this, I'm highlighting not only the range of values, but also where I want to see those totals. Now we can either hit our auto sum button or press that shortcut again, Alt equals, and Excel will populate those cells with those totals. Quick and easy, and another way for you to save time when you want to build sum functions. Number 9, automation tricks. How can you easily automate your work in Microsoft Excel without using macros or programming? Microsoft Excel includes a number of built-in automation features, including autocomplete, autocorrect, and autocalculate. You've likely used the autocomplete feature anytime you're filling in a list of data. For example, when you start typing an entry, here I want the supply room, Excel will try to autocomplete, that is, suggest from the available responses that are already in that column. And if this is what I want, I can simply hit Enter. If it's not, we can keep typing. That works great when these are unique entries. What happens when you have really similar entries? This might mean that you're having to type a lot of characters for you to finally get to that unique entry. And this can be very time consuming, especially when you have lengthy notes or comments. Let's say, for instance, we want to reference a particular conference room. Well, there's multiple conference rooms and they all begin with that phrase. So here's the other way to approach it. To get that list of options, rather than trying to type, press Alt and the down arrow key. All you have to do, Alt and the down arrow key. Here's a list of all of the unique entries in that column. We can simply select the one we want, and we're done. Another way to get that list is to instead right-click on the cell and choose Pick from drop-down list. It's the same as pressing Alt and the down arrow key. You can either use your mouse to navigate to it, or you can use your arrow keys, and then simply enter or select the one that you want. And that's how we can leverage the autocomplete for faster data entry. Autocorrect is another quick way for us to be able to easily enter in data. You may have noticed this as you start typing. For instance, I'll do TEH as in the. And as soon as we hit a space, punctuation, or the Enter key, then Excel will check this against its list of already existing corrections. Now, most of these are spelling errors, and it will fix it for us. And in this case now, we have then the corrected entry for this word. But we can also leverage this to create like a shorthand for lengthy entries we might enter in, such as our department name or organization name. Let's look at how we can work with the autocorrect feature. We'll find this under the File tab. Next, move to Options. From here, select Proofing, and then Autocorrect Options. Proofing is not only for spelling, but also for some of these other built-in features. You'll notice here some of the characteristics here where Excel will try to fix some of your entry in terms of capitalization. But the autocorrect feature that we're going to focus on is Replace Text as you type. The list on the left-hand side tends to be spelling errors. That here's what you might type, and here's what we'll fix. And we've got over 500 entries that are built in. But we can put in our own variations here. I'm going to create just a shorthand here. Now, be careful not to use any acronyms that you might actually use, but it could be a variation, your own version of that shorthand. And this is what I want Excel to do. That is, every time I type in the shorthand, replace it with this entry. I'll add it, and we could build others. For now, though, I'll simply OK out, come back to my worksheet, and keep in mind that this is something that's used by the entire system, so it's not just for this one worksheet. Now I'll put in that shorthand, and it can be included in a larger entry. And as soon as I hit enter or a space bar, Excel will spell it out for me. How could you save time with data entry by using AutoCorrect? AutoCalculate is a great Excel feature that lets you quickly check totals, averages, and much more. Although it doesn't actually build calculations or formulas, it can be a quick auditing tool. Simply select the range that you want to work with. Next, look in your status bar at the bottom here, and you will see the average, count, and sum of the selected range. If this isn't displaying for some reason, or you even want to leverage more from AutoCalculate, simply right-click on your status bar and notice near the bottom here we have additional options. The check mark indicates which of these are currently enabled. And so if you wanted to, for instance, also see the minimum, you could select that and it becomes another part of this AutoCalculate. So this is not something you have to turn on. It is just automatically there as part of how you are viewing that selected range. How can you take advantage of these automatic features in Excel? Number 10, customizing the Quick Access toolbar. To quickly access your frequent and favorite editing actions, your best approach is to add these choices to the Quick Access toolbar. It's also a great place to bring in other choices for formatting, sorting and filtering, and file management. There are 3 different ways to customize the Quick Access toolbar. First of all, let's look at the Quick Access toolbar. If you haven't yet customized it, it will be sitting above the ribbon and only contain a few actions. These include save, undo, and redo. But there's so much more that we can add to this to really save time in Excel. The first customized technique is to simply go to that drop-down arrow and you'll see a number of suggested actions. For instance, new, open, quick print, and many more. That becomes one of the ways to customize it. Our second technique is to add actions as you find them. For instance, for formatting. If you work with a lot of lists that have column headings, you might want to easily be able to apply wrap text. Well, rather than always having to go to the Home tab, instead, we could add this action to our Quick Access toolbar. And we can do so by simply hovering over the tool, whatever that might be, and right-click and then left-click, Add to Quick Access toolbar. What about our Sum function? We'll move to that Sum button either in the Home tab or the Formulas tab, and we just have some subtleties here. If we only want that option, we'll hover over that. If you also will use the functions that are listed in the drop-down like average or count, move your arrow to that drop-down arrow. Next, right-click and left-click Add to Quick Access toolbar. Other actions like our find and replace are things that you could add to that Quick Access toolbar so that you don't necessarily have to go to the Home tab or even remember a keyboard shortcut. If I want to add find, simply right-click here, then add it to the Quick Access toolbar. Now we're starting to build a useful Quick Access toolbar to be able to easily get to those actions. But there's one thing that can make this easier to work with, and that is to move the quick access toolbar below the ribbon. You can keep it right where it's at. The challenge is that the quick access toolbar is sharing space with our other options on the title bar, including the name of the workbook and our Windows management tools. To move it to the bottom, we'll simply left click on that drop-down arrow, and you'll see at the bottom here, show below the ribbon. And now our quick access toolbar could potentially spread the entire width of the screen. At some point, it might no longer be as helpful if you have too many tools on it. Keep in mind, any changes you do to the quick access toolbar apply to your entire Excel system and not just to this workbook. There's one more technique for customizing. We can get to that by going to the drop-down arrow and choosing more commands. The other approach is to choose File Options, and in both cases, these will take us in and we look at the quick access toolbar tab or category over here on the left-hand side. What you'll see on the right-hand side are the tools that are currently part of this quick access toolbar. We can add new tools to that and also rearrange them. Perhaps you want to bring all your file management tools together. Let's say I want that new file at the very beginning. I'll select it and choosing the arrows, move it up and continue this for the other tools until they're arranged in a way that works best for how I like to approach Excel. There might also be other tools that we could add to this without having to find them on the ribbon, or they might not even be on the ribbon. An example of that would be our Save As. We can find this under Popular Commands. And from here, we'll scroll down and locate Save As. To add it to the quick access toolbar, either double click on it or select Add, and then position it as you wish in that quick access toolbar. Do you want to add more to this? Well, there is more, and it's available in your drop down here. There is a category of commands not in the ribbon, or all commands. This can keep you busy. You'll see that there's other classifications based upon the tabs where they're located. Let's pick all commands. We certainly don't want everything here, but what I'm looking for is the close command, because just as often as I'm opening, I want to be able to close. I'll click into the list and then type a letter C for close. Now we'll scroll down, at least it gets us there a little faster, and I'll find the close command. From here, I have Close File. I'll double click and add that. And you even have the option to close all. I like this one, even though it shares the same icon for that, because it is a way to close when I have many sheets open. You'll still be prompted by Excel to save changes as needed. Explore what else you might want to add. It is something that you can build over time and even import or export so that it can be shared amongst computers. For now, we'll simply OK, and we have then our quick access toolbar. Let's use one of those tools here. I have selected the column headings and I want to wrap text. So even if I wasn't in the Home tab, I can now easily format these column headings. How can you save time in Excel? By taking advantage of the quick access toolbar. Now you've seen 10 ways to save time and effort editing your work in Microsoft Excel. Thanks for watching.